first keynote presentation we have here today is from Pat Daly, who's Director of Games Development and Research. And as Liam outlined there, Pat will be presenting on the Coach 10 model, understanding the role of the coach in the coaching process. Pat has been leading games development within the GAA for the last almost 30 years, I suppose, at this stage. And I think some of the thoughts and ideas that are presented here are the culmination of that 30 years of work. So I'll call on Pat Daly now to come up and present to us.
Thanks very much, Peter. Good morning to everybody. I'm delighted to be here. My coaching career started about a mile up the road in 1974 in St. Pat's, when I was following in the footsteps of luminaries such as Brian Cody, Gerald Loughnane, who had also been captain of the hurling club in St. Pat's. And at that time, there wasn't much thought given to training or the type of training. There was a hill at the back of the pitch, and you ran up and down that hill about as often as you could, and you got guys to carry guys up and down that hill. And if anybody asked you why you were doing it, well, because everybody done it, and that was the core and underpinning principle. But I would like to think the thing has moved on a bit since then. So in terms of coach to the power of 10, it probably doesn't mean anything to you now. Hopefully at the end of this session it will mean something. So basically what I want to do, the lads were talking about 30 years, and this is something that has evolved over 30 years. And it's the byproduct of a lot of people's work, in that if we just look at coach development and player development within the association over the last 30 years, in 1979 there was an action plan for GAA coaching. And it was only last week that Joe McGrath, he was one of the people involved in that. Joe passed away. And lots of people like Joe made huge contributions to the initial plan, the plan that got it all started, and that was before I came here. Then we pushed on with the launch of Play Hurling and Play Football video in '82. Joe Lennon was one of the primary people involved in the Play Football video. 1992, I suppose, the first concerted effort was to put material in place that reflected what we were trying to do. So we produced a number of manuals. Hard to imagine that that's 20 years ago now. The basic skills manual for hurling and the complete coaching guide to hurling and football. Coach education program was initiated by the government in 1993, and that's where you had foundation courses, level 1 courses and that type of thing, and we rode in with them. In 2002, I suppose, in anticipation of the IT revolution that was underway, we produced the first CD-ROM. Maybe it was a little before its time, but it was a further enhancement and a further evolution of the thought process, if you like. 1994, we produced what we call the Grassroots National Programme, GMP. GMP is generally used in a slightly different context. And it set out a player development pathway, and I think this was important for one key reason, which the President has already outlined. It differentiated between the child, the youth and the adult, and they are three distinct entities. And we cannot treat children as we would treat youths, and we cannot treat youths as we would treat adults, and it's important that people make that distinction and are clear about that differentiation. Because a lot of the time children have to be left play to learn. If they finish up competing to win like adults, I'm not sure we're doing justice to them in a developmental context, and I think that's important. In 2009 then we ran into a thing called the coaching enigma, and it was Peter Horgan that drew this to my attention. Peter is originally from Middleton and Cork, played in goals with Middleton, has a master's, is currently studying for a PhD, so he's big into literature and reading literature. So the coaching enigma basically was, you can read it for yourself, and there's a bit in it as a sentence, but I suppose if you wanted to steal out of it, in the context of today, how can we be more than the sum of our parts? And we're talking about being more than the sum of our parts if there is an absence of consistency regarding terminology and a lack of clarity around the coaching process. And if the academics were saying that, and that's what they are saying, or were saying in 2009, there's going to be an awful lot of confusion if there is an absence of consistency where terminology is concerned and a lack of clarity around the coaching process. And that might sound a bit highbrow, and it is. So we'll try and simplify it down. So, in terms of the process, this is the key question that I as a coach, that you as a coach, these are the key questions that you have to ask yourselves. What am I trying to do? How am I going to do it? And why am I doing it? They are the three questions that every coach, he or she, has to ask themselves. What am I doing? How am I going to do it? And why is this? Why is this? In a terminology context, and we could come in here, it would be possible to come in here and blind people with science today, but that's not the purpose of the exercise. We have to get it down to a level that people can comprehend. So basically what we're talking about, what you're trying to do with TPP, how are you going to do it? MVA. Now you might say TPP and MVA is as much Swahili to me as anything else, and it probably is, but I'll try and explain what TPP and MVA are. Because if you can combine TPP and MVA, if we can get those combined, we're coaching to the power of 10, and that will make more sense as I progress. So what are we trying to do in a TPP context? That's the question you have to ask yourself as a coach. That's the question that a coach has to ask himself or herself, regardless of the code. So you're trying to build total playing performance. That's what you're trying to do. So what is total playing performance? TPP. TPP didn't come out of the sky. TPP. So we'll have a look at it. And these are the elements of total playing performance. So we'll walk into these now in greater depth. So the first of those is technical proficiency, TP. And technical proficiency is the ability to perform the underlying skills of the game. In other words, you can play off your left and right hand. And I remember growing up in Daly down in West Waterford, where we had one of the most wonderful coaches you could ever have, Ned Power. He played in goals with Waterford. And the critical thing, if you were in fourth class, was were you able to play off your left and were you able to strike off your left and right hand side. And if we were to set our coaches a challenge in at primary school level, I think the important thing is not what they win with teams at that level, but how many kids can play off their left and right hand side. In other words, how many of them have got the technical proficiency. Now, if you put kids into competitive games, they can't, no, they won't develop technical proficiency because they'll play off their left side or their right side, but if they perceive themselves to be weak on one side, they won't do it. So the development of technical proficiency is absolutely crucial, the ability to play off your left and right hand side. Then once you have that ability, the tactical side of it is all about decision making, and that's what's reflected in that logo. You know what to do and when to do it. You can read these definitions for yourselves. They will be on the website afterwards, and so but you can read them for yourself. So you know how to perform the technique. Now, do you know what option to take and when to take it? That's the tactical side of it. So how, what, when, and then in a team play context, if I'm playing with Liam O'Neill, as we did in St. Pat's in an under-21 final against O'Toole's in 1977. I have to be able to anticipate what he's going to do when he gets the ball. Now, it was hard to be honest about it, but because nobody really knew what Liam was going to do when he got the ball, because I'm sure a lot of the time Liam didn't know himself. But the team play side of things is being able to anticipate. So what your teammates are going to do. So if Liam has the ball and I can't anticipate what he's going to do, so the opposition are on the same level as I am. So there's TPP, technical proficiency, tactical prowess, and team play. That's the TP. Then we push on from that, and this is the one, physical fitness. And lots of coaches in this country and elsewhere, that's where the chief focus of attention is. An awful lot of running, an awful lot of whistle blowing, to the detriment of the technical, the tactical, and the team play. Now, if you don't practice the technical, the tactical, and the team play, you can't perform. And you must use a ball to develop the technical, the tactical, and the team play. Because you cannot develop the technical, the tactical, or the team play without a ball. Ideally in a game-type situation. But a lot of coaches don't understand that, and they are totally preoccupied with physical fitness. And that is a challenge for us to change that culture, and that's what part of Coach 10 is about. So that's the physical side. So technical proficiency, tactical prowess, team play. We're on to the P's now, TPP, physical fitness. Next one is probably the most difficult one to explain to people, psychological focus. And that's the ability to maintain attention on the here and now by minimizing disruptions from within and without. And most players are their own biggest enemies. I can't do this, I'm not up to it, I'm not good enough. So they sabotage themselves. It's a lack of confidence. And this is the hardest one to explain to people, what the whole notion of psychological focus is. But it's the ability, you don't get disrupted, you don't get distracted from either within or without. And the last bit then is what we call participant feedback. And that's where you sit down, where coaches and players sit down and try and figure out what's working and what's not working. So when you put all that together, you have players striving to achieve their full individual and collective potential. That's what TPP is about. The technical, the tactical, the team play, backed up by the physical, the psychological, and the performance analysis. Now, that's what you're trying to do. Obviously, in a coaching context, you're going to have to ask yourself the question then, how am I going to do this? And this is where coaches have to be clear in their minds about what it is they're doing. So this is where we've come up with motivation and vocational attributes, MVA. So in a motivational context, what we're saying, if you want to get the most out of players, the coach has to be passionate. Coach has to be principled, persistent, personable, and persuasive. If you want to get the most out of players, you have to be those things: passionate, principled, persistent, personable, and persuasive. And if you think shouting and roaring at people and abusing people will get the most out of them, I'm not sure it will. And I don't think it ties in with being passionate, principled, persistent, personable, and persuasive. Okay, some people will get passionate and get over-emotional, but that is not tantamount to abusing people or shouting and roaring at them, particularly young people, because you will not get the most out of anybody by doing that, unfortunately. That's my experience of the thing. So in a motivation context, they are the criteria, if you like. Now, the vocational side of things basically is what happens on the field. What are you doing on the field as a coach? So the golden rule here: organising purposeful, game-based activities. So it's a case of when you go to the field, you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think the next slide is probably the most important one in terms of all of our coaches being up to speed and being able to deliver on this side of it. So games-based activities. Games-based activities are all about using the ball insofar as you can in a games type environment. So we'll have a look at the model that we've put together for games-based activities. Now, you can have a full-sided game, a small-sided game, or you can have a game of backs and forwards. And any of those, whether it's a full-sided game, a small-sided game, or a game of backs and forwards, it can be conditioned. You can change the rules in any of those. Now, if you say, I'm not going to concentrate on games, I'm going to look at something that's not quite a game and not a drill. So you get into what we call practice plays. It's not a drill, it's not a game, it's somewhere between a drill and a game. And set plays. Set plays basically where you would practice 65s, sideline cuts, puck outs, that kind of thing. And you know, it's one of the things that intrigue me when you see a team getting a 45 or a 65 here. Invariably, everybody heads for the small rectangle. And if they're trying to score a goal and you clog that space, well, the likelihood of scoring a goal is pretty remote. But I often wonder to what extent do teams practice set plays. The last four orbits then, and I suppose this would be the space that a lot of coaches tend to occupy: basic drills. A basic drill is where the ball is doing the work. An intermediate drill is where the ball and the player is doing some work. Advanced drills are where you're working flat to the board, but not necessarily in a games type context. There's a huge amount of routine about it. And the final bit of the jigsaw is what we call fun routines, things that are just undertaken for a bit of fun and to have a laugh, and that's important. It's important that training is enjoyable and that people have a laugh and they experience a sense of enjoyment when they are playing. So games-based activities, that's what games-based activities are all about. And if every coach in this country could negotiate and navigate their way around that, I think we truly would have a wonderful coaching setup. Because then it would be driven by the needs of the player in the context of a game, in an environment that would be ultra enjoyable. Now, this is where it gets complex, and this is why the people find it hard to define what the coaching process is about. This is what's happening in a motivation context. This is what's happening on the field. So the player as a person is passionate, principled, persistent, personable, persuasive. On the field, he's or she is adhering to the golden rule, organising purposeful game-based activities. Now, what is the outcome of that? When you combine the two of those, what you find happening then, what happens? You're empowering, you're energising, you're getting engagement and enthusiasm around excellence. That's what you're doing, because the motivation and the vocational, they're working together, and you're empowering, energising, getting engagement and enthusiasm around excellence. And it's difficult to quantify these things. If somebody said to me, to what extent am I empowering? To what extent am I energising? To what extent am I getting engagement? To what extent is there enthusiasm and is the whole thing driven by excellence? It's very hard to quantify these things. And it's even harder still to quantify the next things. Do you build trust? Do you build self-esteem, family feel, high morale, and team spirit? It's hard to quantify those things, but I'll tell you one thing, if you haven't got them, you ain't gone any place as a team. And I would have seen that, without getting parochial about it, I would have seen that in my own club this year, a team that lost a game in the league by 21 points to 5, subsequently went on and won the minor football championship. And that was because of, I would say, a lot of the things that are in there. And it was a tribute to the people that were in charge of that team. So now, the motivation and vocational attributes that inspire players to achieve total playing performance. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what the coach is trying to do. That's how the coach is going to do it. Now, if we can get the two of these to connect, the what and the how connect. Why do they connect? Because you're now coaching to the power of 10. What's that mean? Because the coach is building competence, confidence, composure, commitment, and a sense of connection amongst players. Those words, 5 words, have 10 letters. Why is the coach? Why is the coach building those things? Because the coach has the management and leadership capability that comes from experience and reflection. That's why the coach is doing it. So this is where the coaching to the power of 10 came out of, those 10 words with 10 letters. Now, why is the coach building competence, confidence, composure, commitment and connection? Because the coach has management and leadership capability that comes from experience and reflection. And why is that? Because the coach is operating on the basis of motivational and vocational attributes. And everything you see up there has 10 letters. Now, this has nothing to do with the thing having 10 letters. That's only a design feature of the Coach 10 model. So if you want to build competence, confidence, composure, commitment and connection, it requires management, leadership capability that comes from experience and reflection, and the key to that are motivational and vocational attributes. And it has a hugely multiplier effect. That works, it works, one thing is driving the other, and all things are driving each other. So right, I don't know how many people have heard of a guy called Stephen Covey. He was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those was to commence with the end in mind. I suppose another way of putting that is you have a vision of what you're trying to do. So if you have a vision of what you're trying to do, you will be able to work it out fairly logically and fairly sequentially in terms of what has to be done. So if we were to cast our minds forward to 2022, the aspiration would be that all players would aspire to attain the MVA qualification. And that would be the qualification which verifies that a coach can combine his or her motivation and vocational inputs to create a series of attributes which inspire players to achieve total playing performance. That would be the aspiration and in business they talk about an MBA. In coaching we would be talking about an MVA. And that would be the ultimate coaching accolade, the ultimate coaching qualification, because you would have the motivational and vocational attributes. You would be working on that basis and enabling people to achieve their full playing potential. Now, I'm long enough in this game, and that would be the verification that you would have a certificate with that authentication of the fact that you were coaching to the power of 10, that you were an MVA and you were coaching to the power of 10. Now, I suppose I'm long enough in this game to realise that different people here today would be at different stages of development in terms of coaching. So some people might say, I'm a foundation coach, I'm a level 1 coach, I'm a level 2 coach, I'm a level 3 coach, or whatever, doesn't really matter. For me, it's all about, you're an emerging coach, you're an established coach, but the important thing, are you an enlightened coach? And different things will take different people here today, depending on where they are, depending on whether you're at the emerging, established or enlightened stage. Different people will take different things from the presentation here today. That's inevitable. Cahill Gabram once said, nobody can reveal to you that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your own consciousness. So in other words, if you're not aware to these things, they may not resonate with you. So different people, depending on whether they're emerging, established or enlightened, will take different things from this presentation today. But if there is one thing that I would like to see everybody taking from the presentation, what is it? It is the absolute centrality of game-based activities. That is central to what we are about. That is central to what effective coaching is about. That is central to what getting players is all about. Getting better players, getting more tuned-in players is all about. It's not about running people around fields. It's not about like what we were at above in St. Pat's in '77, running up and down the hill. It's having a basis, having some rational basis to what we're doing on the field and clearly understanding what we're doing. And if coaches clearly understand it, players will clearly understand it. And if players clearly understand it, I think we're in business, because then we'll have more tuned in players, more tuned in coaches, and that ultimately will give us better games. I'm not sure how we're running time-wise, but it's 10:06, so we may be able to take some questions. So we're due to finish at 10:30. But the final point I'd like to make is it's a reflection. The coach who correctly understands how a particular structure works can prevent it from working or make it work differently. Might even make it work better, with much less effort than a coach who does not know these things. So in a nutshell, what, how and why. If you understand what, how and why, you will be a better coach. And that really means being able to comprehend TPP and MVA and ultimately getting the MVA qualification. Thanks for your time, thanks for your attention. I hope that the presentation will resonate with you, and more importantly, I hope that we will see it bearing fruit in the years ahead on the playing fields of the association, not alone in this country, but across the world. Thanks very much. Now, I know we're running a little before schedule, so there's some people with mics, so maybe we might take a couple of questions if people have any questions.
Pat, I'm just wondering what the plan would be to roll this out in 32 counties.
Yeah, well, the intention would be, obviously, people might perceive coaching to the power of 10 to be new, revolutionary. It's not. Coaching to the power of 10 is kind of a step up from what was there. The intention is that we would roll it out across the 32 counties, and the intention is that the focus would be on a games-based approach to coaching and development. Now, in the past, I suppose coach education basically was equated with coaching courses. And I'm not exactly sure if that was the best way of delivering coach education. And I'm still not convinced it's the best way of delivering coach education. So in terms of the model that we perceive going forward, what we would like to see happening is that there would be communities of practice. In other words, people who are involved as coaches would come together as a community of practice, and they would take the kind of material that we are talking about. For example, if we had a community of practice based around that, all coaches would come in and sit down and discuss that. Because it is Brian Cuthbert, who presented here last year from Cork and who's very much involved in coaching in Cork. It's established that formal coaching accounts for only about 10%. Formal courses accounts for only about 10% of coaching behaviour. So where does the other 90%, what accounts for the other 90%? Informal, non-formal, what you see other people doing. But I think the important thing is that what you know is informed by sound constructs like TPP and MVA, and sound principles like a games-based approach to training and development. So what I would see developing is we would have communities of practice, we would have mentoring, and Jimmy Darcy will be talking about the digital online education system that's currently being rolled out. And we can have those in a real environment, or we can have them in a virtual environment using that. So in answer to the question, yeah, the intention would be to roll this out, roll it out across a number of different platforms in terms of courses, workshops, the online system, the communities of practice, and by way of mentoring. But that would be the intention, very definitely, to get it down to the masses and ensure that as many people are availing of this and putting it into practice as possible. Okay, Peter says we'll take another question. Have we any other question? One here at the first. Al.
Congratulations, Pat. You covered that brilliantly. I just had two little points. There are counties where, although there are lots of coaches who have done courses, they're not being used either by their clubs or their counties, and this is creating a kind of an anomaly. You have fellas that should know better. And the other point is, when we give people coaching certificates, there's one great lack, I think, in what we're doing. We see them coaching in a small environment. The place to judge whether the what and the why and the how is done is see them coaching in their own clubs, Pat. And until we get to that stage, I think you shouldn't give Al a certificate to say he's a coach, except you look at him and see if he can do it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think you've 2 points there, Val, Al, sorry, that coaches being appointed who don't have qualifications to the exclusion of people who do have qualifications. And I suppose that is a problem. Why does it happen? Probably comes down to internal politics in clubs and counties. You could say that doesn't happen, but it does in the real world. Unfortunately, it does happen. Ideally, you'd like to see a scenario that people who are the only people who would be appointed are the qualified people, the people who have the courses to back it up. But yeah, ultimately, that's something that's going to be decided by the club concerned, by the school concerned, by the county concerned. And we would be doing our utmost, and Eugene McGee can elaborate on it later in terms of the FRC proposals, in terms of what they expect coaches to have, the qualifications they expect coaches to have. And maybe on a progressive basis, we may be able to do that. The second point,
Not giving them a certificate.
Sorry?
Not giving them a certificate, we will see that.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Well look, at the end of the day, we have 20,000 teams. And ideally, you'd love to have a situation where you could go and satisfy yourself that a coach had the qualifications, had the credentials. In other words, that they were practicing what you see there, that they were practicing TPP and MVA. That's not always possible, because with 20,000 teams, that's 40,000 people. There's a huge logistical exercise involved there. And you don't, so I think the difficulty there is logistics, but technology can be seen as a threat or a treat. I think technology will enable us to do an awful lot of things that we couldn't do in that field before, in terms of validating and certifying competency, and that people have the ability to do what we say the certificate says they can do. So I think that's something that will probably come in time, and technology will allow us to do it. I just think the problem today has been the sheer size of the operation. 20,000 teams, 40,000 coaches, and a lot of those coaches coming and going because they might be involved with a team, the kids drop out and they're gone. You've no people coming into the system, so I think it's the logistics attaching to that more than anything else. Okay, we'll take one final question, if there is one.
what you're outlining seems to be a very, very big shift from drill-based coaching to games-based coaching. Could you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Yeah, basically, I think if you look at the diagram that's there in front of you, what's at the centre of that are games. What's at the outside periphery is drills. You would love to say, some people would say, look, forget about drills, let's not have any drills. Just concentrate on full-sided games, small-sided games, backs and forwards, and how you condition those. And forget about the outside circle where you have the drills. But I think it's basically, it's getting the best possible combination of those. The drills may be important, Tommy, in terms of developing technical proficiency in striking off the left, striking off the right. For example, I remember saying at a conference one time that a person should get 200 ball contacts in a coaching session. And there was an Australian guy there, and he said, "Hey mate, he should get 200 in the warm-up." So, you know what I mean? No, he said, "Hey Paddy, he should get 200 in the warm-up." So, no wonder Ollie, young Kilkenny is coming home, but it's a case of I think people understanding what they're trying to do, Tommy. And we had a guy here during the summer. He's Professor Brian McCulloch. He's the leading trainer of PE teachers in North America, and he was very taken with the model. But he spoke about an apprenticeship of observation. And what's an apprenticeship of observation? You basically coach the way you were coached. And if you were coached with a heavy emphasis on physical fitness and drills, that's the way you're going to coach. So what we have to do is try and change that apprenticeship of observation and take people in. And I suppose if we wanted evidence of the games-based approach, the first place we'd go to, Tommy, is Kilkenny, and the first club we might go to would be James Stephens. Because if you want it, you'll get it in abundance down there. They don't deviate too much from the centre of that circle. That's not to say they don't engage in drills, they do, but insofar as we can, the emphasis should be on the game, playing the game as far as possible. So I suppose at the end of the day, like most things in life, Tommy, it's a case of balance. So look, there you go. I think we might be 5 minutes ahead of schedule. That's no harm, because it will enable us to kind of push on, and in previous years we have fallen behind schedule. So look, thanks for the questions, thanks for your attention, and more importantly, the best of luck in your coaching endeavours.